Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start with a look at the day's headlines. Singapore, June 12th, 2018. We now have confirmation on the time and setting for a truly historic summit between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Trump is predicting a big success for the forthcoming meeting. Summit set and prisoners set free, greeting 3 returning Americans from North Korea. President Trump praises the North Korean leader and says the two sides are on a new footing. Plus, Israel launches its biggest assault inside Syria since the start of the civil war, targeting Iran's military infrastructure in the country. June 12th, remember the date, as you're going to be hearing it an awful lot over the coming weeks. That's when US President Donald Trump will hold his historic summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. As for the location, no real surprises there, as the widely speculated venue of Singapore was confirmed as the setting for the talks. Jae-in with the details.
It was the announcement the world had been waiting for. U.S. President Donald Trump took to Twitter on Thursday to confirm that his summit with Kim Jong-un will take place in Singapore on Tuesday, June 12th, adding that they will both try to make it a very special moment for world peace. Trump's announcement came a matter of hours after he welcomed home 3 Americans who had been imprisoned in North Korea. Experts say North Korea's denuclearization will dominate the agenda of the Singapore talks. President Trump's aim is the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of the regime. Kim, for his part, has repeatedly expressed a commitment to abandon the regime's nuclear weapons program, despite being unclear on what the terms are. Singapore has also confirmed it will play host to the summit. Its Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in a statement on Thursday that the meeting will advance prospects for peace in the Korean Peninsula. Observers say the Southeast Asian financial hub was likely chosen due to its neutrality, security advantages, and track record of hosting international summits. But why June 12th? Watchers say the date was chosen strategically, as Singapore hosts the annual Shangri-La Dialogue, a defense forum attended by heads of states, defense ministers, and high-level military officials from June 1st to the 3rd, while the 44th G7 summit in Canada will take place from June 8th to the 9th. Now that the venue and date has been set, the world waits to see if Singapore will host a meeting that ushers in a new era of denuclearization and peace on the Korean Peninsula. Jae-in, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, South Korea's presidential Blue House has welcomed President Trump's announcement that the historic North Korea-US summit will take place on the 12th of June in Singapore. In a text message sent out to the Blue House press corps, the Blue House's spokesperson said Seoul's top office hopes the Kim-Trump meeting will bring denuclearization and lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. President Jae-in is set to meet with his US counterpart in Washington on May 22nd to coordinate the allies' positions after the Inter-Korean summit in Panmunjom and ahead of the North Korea-US summit in Singapore. It's a dream to be home. Those were the words uttered by one of the 3 Americans who were back on US soil following their release from North Korea. Meeting them off the plane in the middle of the night was President Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, as well as Vice President Mike Pence. President Trump heaped more praise on the North Korean leader for freeing the Americans and said his upcoming summit with Kim will be a big success. Won Jung-hwan reports.
The 3 Americans released from detention in North Korea are back in the U.S. They arrived at Joint Base Andrews near Washington, D.C., and President Trump was there to board the plane and greet them at around 3 a.m. local time. He and the First Lady escorted the 3 down the stairs onto American soil and announced their official welcome to the press. In his remarks, President Trump expressed his gratitude to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for releasing them.
We very much appreciate that he allowed them to go before the meeting. I really think he wants to do something. I think he did this because I really think he wants to do something and bring that country into the real world. I really believe that, John, and I think that we're going to have a success. I think this will be a very big success.
They had been detained for more than a year, and among them, Kim Dong-chul, a Christian pastor, had been detained the longest, more than 900 days. The other two, Kim Ak-song and Tony Kim, who both worked at a Pyongyang university, were detained by the North Korean regime about a year ago. Their families weren't able to meet them at the base when they arrived, but they have issued a statement thanking President Trump for engaging directly with North Korea. As the three men stepped onto the tarmac, there were cheers from the press when they saw they were in good condition and able to walk without assistance. But when asked about their time in North Korea, it was clear that they had been through a lot.
They treated us in many different ways. For me, I had to do a lot of labor, but when I got sick, I also got medical attention.
The Americans' return is another step towards possibly a new era of relations between Pyongyang and Washington as the summit between Kim and Trump draws closer. 원정환, Arirang News.
Now, with North Korea's release of the formerly detained Americans, attention here in the south shifts to the 6 South Koreans being held hostage by Pyongyang. Our Oh Jung-hee sheds light on who these detainees are and what Seoul plans to do to win their freedom.
Now that the 3 U.S. citizens who had been detained in North Korea are back home, focus in Seoul is now on its own citizens who are still behind bars in the north. There are 6 South Koreans held in the north, 3 missionaries and 3 people who escaped from the regime but were taken back. Arirang News had an opportunity to meet with Kim Jong-sam, the elder brother of Kim Jong-uk, one of the 3 missionaries. Kim Jong-uk provided food and accommodation for North Korean citizens and taught Christian principles in Dandong, a city on China's border with North Korea. But he was caught by the regime in 2013 for what the North called anti-state crimes. Kim's family in South Korea found out through media reports that Kim was detained, but since then, they haven't heard anything about him.
There's been no response from North Korea, even when the South Korean government has raised the issue, or when I sent a letter to the International Committee of the Red Cross. I don't know if he's alive or dead.
He hopes that a string of inter-Korean talks following the summit last month could lead to a change in his brother's situation. The Seoul government says it's pouring efforts to bring back South Korean detainees. The presidential office of Cheongwade told reporters the government's measures or policies might not be visible all the time, but everything is being done to bring them back to Seoul. While the first round of inter-Korean high-level talks after the summit are expected to be held next week, Seoul's Unification Ministry says it'll continue to work on humanitarian issues through coming opportunities. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Now staying here on the Korean Peninsula, a large-scale joint military drill kicks off today. South Korea and the US will hold the massive combined Air Force drills for 2 weeks. The exercises are aimed at strengthening their hand ahead of the denuclearization talks between Pyongyang and Washington. The Max Thunder exercise will involve some 100 warplanes, including 8 F-22 radar-evading fighters, as well as an unspecified number of B-52 bombers and F-15K jets. It's the first time the two allies are deploying 8 F-22s to a joint drill. A South Korean Air Force official who asked not to be named said Max Thunder will help the allies improve their aerial operations techniques. Now, we're going to take a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we start with the turmoil in the Middle East. Israel says it has almost wiped out Iran's entire military infrastructure in Syria after Iranian forces fired rockets at Israeli-held territory early this week. For more on this and other international news, let's turn to our Noah Aram. So Aram, the military exchange between the two countries is being described as the most serious in a great many years. Fill us in on the details.
Yes, Mark. Israel says Thursday's attack was its largest barrage in Syria since the start of the civil war there 7 years ago, and was also a clear warning to Iran. It came in response to Israeli claims that Iranian forces based in Syria fired some 20 rockets at Israeli military positions in the occupied Golan Heights overnight. Israel's military says it managed to intercept most of the projectiles, adding there was minimal damage and no casualties. The extent of the damage inflicted by the Israeli airstrikes was not immediately clear, but Syria's military said 3 people had died. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran had, quote, crossed a red line and that his country's action was appropriate. Iran's leaders have not yet issued an official response to the Israeli accusations or the military strikes, but if confirmed, it would be the first time Iranian forces have fired rockets directly at Israeli forces. Thursday's exchange was the most direct confrontation between the two adversaries ever, which is reported to have lasted for hours. There are also concerns the fighting could escalate further, with other players coming into the mix, such as Iran's Shiite allies in Iraq and the Shiite militant group Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel, meanwhile, has the backing of the United States, which has called Iran's attack provocative. Iran's rocket attack also came a couple of days after President Trump announced he was pulling out of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Russia, meanwhile, another ally of the Assad regime in Syria, has called on all parties to show restraint. Just 2 days after President Trump's announcement to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, the US has imposed more sanctions on Iranians. The latest sanctions mainly target a currency network accused of funneling large sums of money to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Special Operations Force. Park Hee-jun reports.
The United States has imposed its first sanctions on 9 Iranian individuals and entities, just days after President Trump's announcement to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. The U.S. Treasury Department announced Thursday that it took joint action with the United Arab Emirates against 6 individuals and 3 companies to disrupt an extensive currency exchange network that has funneled millions of U.S. dollars to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's elite Quds Force, a group designated by Washington as a supporter of terrorism since 2007. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin gave a statement accusing the Iranian regime and its central bank of helping the group access U.S. dollars to use for malign activities such as funding and arming its regional proxy groups. He called for the international community's joint efforts to combat Iran's efforts to fund what he called the world's largest state sponsor of terror. The UAE government has also announced that it will impose sanctions against 9 Iranian individuals and entities. It did not specify the targets, but American media have reported that they are likely to be the same entities that the U.S. has targeted. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Chinese maritime officials have announced that the Bohai Strait and an area north of the West Sea will be cordoned off for 1 week starting today. Military observers believe the restrictions are part of preparations for sea trials of China's new 001A aircraft carrier. The areas are close to the shipyard in the northeastern province of Liaoning, where the carrier was built, and similar restrictions along the Bohai Strait have been put in place during the last month. At least 47 people have been killed and about 40 others are still missing after a dam in northern Kenya burst following weeks of torrential rain. The Patel Dam, located on a commercial flower farm in Kenya's Rift Valley, ruptured Wednesday evening local time as unsuspecting residents were having meals nearby. Local officials fear the death toll could rise as some people are still stuck under the debris and mud brought on by the flood waters.
Thank you to Aram there for the international news. Now, Thursday marked the 1-year anniversary since President Moon Jae-in's inauguration. There were no fancy events to celebrate the occasion at the top office, just another day, business as usual. The Liberal leader did post a message of gratitude via his social media accounts, vowing to stand by the people until the end of his term. Hwang Ho-jun reports.
1년 전 오늘 생각하니까 정말 기억도 잘 안 납니다. 그날이 있었는가 싶고요.
Well, Mr. President, it's hard to blame you. It was quite a day. A briefing from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the break of dawn, visiting the National Cemetery, the headquarters of each political party, and the National Assembly to be inaugurated, then appointing key Blue House officials and the Prime Minister, and finally taking a congratulatory phone call from the U.S. President at night. In light of the anniversary, President Moon Jae-in posted a statement on social media thanking the Korean people for their support. In his message, which he said he wrote Wednesday on his way back from Tokyo, the president said the past year was about transforming Korea into a country that people can be proud of. He said his administration has tried to eradicate deep-rooted evils like corruption and set the nation's history straight while seeking reconciliation. It also tried, he said, to eliminate the fear of war and establish a sustainable peace while showing Korea's potential to the world through the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. The South Korean president also noted that his efforts have been met with some resistance from people he said fear change. He stressed that he and his administration still have a long way to go and pledged to power through alongside the people. And in another tweet, the liberal leader thanked the people for their love and support and expressed his desire to make a positive impact on people's lives during his time in office.
A lot of important things are happening in the region now diplomatically, including but not only the recent Inter-Korean summit, the trilateral talks between Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing, and the upcoming Pyongyang-Washington summit. So there was no extravagant ceremony to celebrate the administration's first year. But as he starts his next four, President Moon is sounding as committed to change as he was last May when he came into office pledging to build, quote, a nation worthy of being called a nation. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
So 12 months has passed since President Moon took office, and there may or may not have been great fundamental changes, but one thing's for sure, the top office and the president seem more people-friendly, especially compared to his recent predecessors. Cha Sang-mi went to see what the public think for herself.
It's been a year since the Moon Jae-in administration came into office, promising change. Change for the people in their daily lives for the entire nation. One of the many changes in the past year has been witnessed in and around the presidential Blue House. Mount Inwangsan is one place where such change can be clearly seen.
Part of this mountain, however, has been restricted to the public since January 1968, after North Korean special forces attempted to assassinate the then South Korean President Park Chung-hee in his residence at the Blue House.
Following President Moon's visit to the mountain in March, the Blue House decided to tear down the barbed wire fences.
Some areas were restricted for military and security reasons, but after long discussions, we recently decided to open up and return the entire mountain to citizens.
Cutting-edge surveillance equipment has since been put in place.
When I came hiking here a few years ago, these areas were all off-limits. It's meaningful that it's open to the public now.
We traveled all the way from Incheon as we heard the mountain was opening up for President Moon's first-year anniversary. We love it.
The road in front of the Blue House, which had been closed at night for the last half a century, opened its iron gate to the public, day and night, starting in June last year. Now tourists and protesters enjoy their right to expression and freedom of speech.
So this is the first time I've been back to Korea since the new administration, and I've seen such a big change in Seoul and in Korea in general.
The gardens inside the Blue House, which had long been regarded as strictly off-limits to the average Koreans, have now become a venue for the nation's first couple and their neighbors to enjoy a late spring evening concert under the calm moon's tranquil beam.
제가 여러분의 이웃이 된 지 어느덧 1년이 되었습니다. 우리 부부와 우리 청와대 식구 모두가 우리 주민들께 드리는 특별한 그런 감사 선물이라고 여겨주시면 좋겠습니다.
The Cheongwade, the president, the nation, at least at its first-year mark, still making efforts to increasingly become one for the friends and families of all people indeed. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Now, the ruling Democratic Party of Korea will be electing a new floor leader. Today, it's a two-way race between three-term lawmakers No Eun-rae and Hong Young-pyo. The incoming whip will be replacing Woo Won-sik, and the new leader will take the helm for the next 12 months. Whoever gets the nod faces a number of serious challenges. First, he must deal with a standoff between rival parties that has intensified over a special counsel probe into an online opinion rigging scandal. Despite negotiations this week, rival parties failed to reach a compromise and the National Assembly remains gridlocked. The new whip must also seek ways to step up cooperation with the opposition bloc for the smooth rollout of the Moon administration's policy goals. The result is expected in the next couple of hours. Korean businesses will invest up to $150 billion over the next 5 years in new industries like driverless cars, renewable energy, and the Internet of Things. Seoul's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy announced its new industry development plan on Friday with businesses in the private sector. Dubbed the Industry Innovation 2020 platform, the ministry says it expects the investment to create around 200,000 new jobs by the year 2022. It will support the plan through easing government regulations and nurturing talent. The South Korean government has announced its new goal of slashing plastic waste by half over the coming decade. The Environment Ministry's plan will ban single-use plastic bags at retail shops and the sale of coloured plastic bottles for beverages. Coloured plastic is harder to recycle than clear plastic. Under the new regulations, beverage makers will be banned from using coloured plastic bottles from 2020 after a grace period, and supermarkets and grocery stores will not be allowed to give out plastic bags from October. Also, large coffee chains and fast food restaurants will be offered incentives to use individual tumblers or mugs instead of plastic cups. With it, the ministry hopes to raise the recycling rate to 70% by the year 2030 from the current 34%.
Good morning. Unlike the clear blue skies we had yesterday, things are looking a little different for us in Korea today. But Tokyo will finally enjoy some bright sunshine all day. The breezy morning in Korea is turning mild fast, so expect big gaps in temperatures today, and Seoul and Busan will get up to 21 and 20 degrees Celsius respectively. And Gyeongju should be one of the warmest cities in the nation, getting up to 26 degrees Celsius. But despite more clouds, we'll still have high to very high UV rays. Another rainy weekend is in the forecast. It's going to rain all day Saturday, but should let up by dawn on Sunday. And next week, it will start to feel more like early summer. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. So South Korea will have partly sunny skies all day today, while North Korea will have a mix of sun and rain on Friday. And over in Beijing, a mix of clouds and sun during the morning will give way to cloudy skies this afternoon. Sydney and Melbourne have got a lot cooler, but Perth is still seeing some hot temperatures, but the heat will ease up next week. Another band of rain is in the forecast on Friday in Chicago area, along with a huge drop in temperatures, so dress warmly. And as for South America, the rain that's been falling for weeks on Argentina's main agricultural region is hampering the soy harvest. The rain will taper off overnight, and Friday is forecast to be rather cloudy. Taking you to Europe, those in Rome will enjoy some sunshine on Friday, but rain will return on Saturday. And there will be hot weather on Friday in Egypt. And that's all the weather update for now.
Well, that's pretty much all we have for now. From next week, I'll be moving to the 7 a.m. newscast and leaving this bulletin in the very capable hands of our Shin Se-min. We will be back at noon Korea time with more news. We do hope to see you then. Goodbye.